Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this very special day. I have 6 terrifying tales for you today. The final story is particularly gruesome, so please feel free to skip it if it makes you uncomfortable at any point. Without further ado, put on your headphones and allow me to accompany you while you are getting everything ready for the big event. Why, hello there, young trainer. You look quite fatigued. Why don't you take a little rest here? No? You want to look for slowpokes? Let me tell you, those slowpokes are quite aggressive nowadays, ever since those rocket fools came bumbling along. Here, take a drink of water, while I tell you how dangerous those Pokemon are. Many slowpokes lived in that beautiful grassland, all happy, content with the lazy life they had, until a group of men clad in black came along, obsessed with their tails. Chop. They took a tail. Chop. They took another tail. These men stole tail after tail, leaving the slowpokes groaning in agony when they took the tails. Some slowpokes died from the sheer pain of their tails being forcefully taken. However, the rest that lived bore a strong hatred towards the ones that took their tails. Slowly, they began to grow fierce and even more untamed. The men still came able to snatch a few tails every now and then. Until one day, one of the slowpokes managed to strike at the wicked men. The slowpoke forced a man on the ground, then tried to look for his own tail. Unfortunately, there was no sign of his tail. The slowpoke, being an average dim-witted slowpoke, simply ripped the man's arm off, substituting the arm as his tail. The arm worked well for a tail, and the slowpoke began to spread news about this new way to get tails. The slowpokes with missing tails pounced on every person that was clad in black, believing it to be their enemy. They would rip off their arms and legs and strut off with them happily. Then why, you would probably be thinking, do you not see any slowpokes with arms or legs as tails? That's simple. The slowpokes love to swim, you see. They would go into the water straight after they acquired their new tail and test out its capabilities in water. That's when the shelders strike. You probably know that, according to theory, a shelder clamps itself onto a slowpoke's tail, and Slowpoke would evolve into Slowbro. Well, that's exactly what happened. The shelders love the taste of human meat so much that it would do anything to stay there forever. Of course, the Slowbros didn't mind, for the shelter gives it strength. Once a trainer accidentally cut off the arm from a Slowbro. The Pokemon was so enraged it snarled and hissed, and its power manifested greatly. The trainer was immediately killed, his arm ripped off for compensation. The shelter then clamps back to the new arm. Slowpokes aren't meant to be trifled with, trainer. If you want to fight with one head-on, I hope you don't use your arms much. There once was a mother who had lost her child. His name had been Zach, and he was only 4 years old when he disappeared into the Pinwheel Forest. His mother was distraught and searched for him day and night for nearly 20 years. Her husband had left her, claiming he couldn't live with a woman stuck in the past. He told her that he missed Zach just as much as she did, but they both needed to move on. He'd been missing for 20 years after all, and the man was lonely and sad. But the mother didn't pay any attention. She let him go without a word and only continued to stare out the window of her small apartment in Castelia City. Her friends sometimes visited. They sat on the couch and watched her, sharing hushed words every so often. Many times they tried to draw her away from the window, but she would simply look at them, eyes glazed and far away, and say, "No, I'll stay here. Zach will be coming soon, and I don't want to miss him." Worried and defeated, the mother's friends would leave, promising to visit again soon. Then one day, a tiny knock came at the door. The mother rose from her chair and went to answer it, fervently hoping it was her lost son, returned from his playing in Pinwheel Forest. She opened the door and looked down on a small child. His hair was red, his skin was gray, and he had a small, fluffy tail. But he looked like her dear, lost Zach. The mother snatched the boy up, crying and scolding and laughing all at once. She had lost all concept of time long ago, and the fact that it had taken 20 years for her child to return, and he was still very small, didn't make any impact on her joy at seeing him. Her 4-year-old son had returned. The mother sat Zach on the couch and told him to wait there while she made him a sandwich. Then, she watched him eat and watch cartoons with all the love in the world. The sun sank below the horizon and the mother put Zach to bed, kissing him on the top of his head and telling him to have the sweetest dreams. She turned out the light and went to her own bed for the first time in 20 years. She slept soundly and woke up in a terrific mood, singing as she made breakfast for her darling child. She went to the dining room with a plate of scrambled eggs in her hands, and Zach was waiting for her, a wide grin on his face. "Hello, my dear," she said cheerfully to him, setting down the plate. "Look, I made you breakfast." Zach didn't say anything, but simply tilted his head to the side. The grin on his face stretched even wider, and his bushy tail flicked from side to side. Mischief flared in his green eyes. The mother's friends came by later and knocked on the door. When they didn't get an answer, they went in to see what was wrong. One of the friends, who was from Nuvema, had brought her young daughter a new trainer with 2 Pokemon and a Pokedex. They searched the entire apartment, but only found a small, fox-like Pokemon. It was gray, with red tufts of fur and green eyes. It smiled at them mischievously and yipped. Excited to see a new Pokemon, the young trainer knelt down in front of it and pulled her Pokedex out of her backpack. It buzzed, and an automatic voice began to speak. Zorua. It changes into the forms of others to surprise them. Apparently, it often transforms into a silent child. It was about 8 o'clock when I realized I should head back home in Snowbell City. I ventured to the winding woods to possibly find the coveted, green-eyed Jigglypuff. Using my Poke Radar, I was at a chain of 28. My Meowstic Trixie tugged my shirt, so I leaned downwards. She pointed west, where the path to our house was. I replied, "Just a little longer." This was the longest chain I'd ever had, and I wasn't willing to give it up. I continued the monotonous, suspenseful, shiny hunt. At a chain of 40 now, I desperately wanted to head home. Flappy, my Fletchinder, did as well. The thought of finally finding a shiny of one of my favorite Pokemon made me stay. I had seen many people in the past find shinies in this exact place, so I knew it wasn't barren. These people, namely Wolfric and Candace, inspired me to go on. Going through the motions was easy, but my Pokemon continued to hint to me. They kept hinting to go home, but I didn't know why. Maybe they were tired. I had never seen them behave like this before. 58, 59, 60, 61, I counted up and up. "Where are they?" I finally bursted out. I decided to sit down for a moment just to rest, and maybe let my Pokemon too. I sat on the leafy rock and just shut my eyes for what I thought was 5 minutes. When I awoke, I had no idea what time it was. I knew it was somewhere past 12. I wondered how I awoke. Then I remembered the dream I had. It had eerie noises or hums. As I adjusted to the cool, brisk air around me, I heard the same noise I had heard in my dream. It was a soft, sweet, angelic hum. What could it be from? I asked myself. Maybe just a little girl walking. I refused to discontinue this epic chain I was holding. Then I made a deal with myself. Once I get to 100, I can be done. That was my deal. I sealed it in my brain. No loopholes. So, at 70 now, I turned my Poke Radar on, pressed the button, and then it flashed 10 grasses to left. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment only some could dream of. A sparkling grass, the residing place for a shiny Pokemon. I had to make sure that I didn't walk into any other shaky grasses. So, I made a route to get to there. Trixie and Flappy were pecking and clawing at me, but it didn't feel like either of them. It felt like a long, slender vine or two. No, I can't look back. I have what I was waiting for, no distractions. I continued my invisible route to that shiny grass that I had my eyes glued on. That unknown feeling I'd felt a bit earlier came over my shoulder. Ignoring it once again, I walked on 3 grasses more. Then the vine or arm or whatever it was slapped me in the face. I fell back, and when I opened my eyes, I found a menacing Gorgeous looking at me. Strangely, after blinking, another appeared, then a third. I crawled my way over, but the vines of them grabbed me and in a way strangled my legs. Like an arbok, they entangled my entire body. They continued to tighten their grips, and I just kept hitting and kicking them. They were as a whole too much for me or my Pokemon. We all continued to pound them with all our might. Another feature that I hadn't noticed was that they hummed that hum. All the time they slowly killed me. My legs had no circulation now. I knew I had no chance. I remembered now that I had brought along 9-tails. I don't remember how or why, but I overlooked that and reached to the bag that they had thrown off of me. They grabbed my hand and then my other hand that I tried grabbing it with. "Trixie, use Psychic!" We had battled in hordes before, but never at this high level. These Gorgeous were probably level 50 or higher. Trixie opened her ear flaps and let out her psychic wrath, entirely mutilating all 3 of the Gorgeous and partially destroying me. Legs broken, I asked Flappy to go for help. There was no way I could get out of here alive. Nevertheless, I would try to. Flappy came back about a minute later with Nurse Joy running alongside him. My ears had stopped working now, and all I could do was lay effortlessly. What happened after that was a blur. Gorgeist. Singing in eerie voices, they wander town streets on the night of the new moon. Anyone who hears their song is cursed. It enwraps its prey in its hair-like arms. It sings joyfully as it observes the suffering of its prey. I hate Absol, hate them with a passion. Not because of what they are, but what they stand for. My whole life I've been seeing them. It's actually just one. Every time I see it, someone I care about disappears. I saw the Absol for the first time when I was only 6 years old. My mother and I were taking a walk in the woods near our house. It was a large forest, and it had all sorts of small Pokemon in it. Seedot, Oddish, Zigzagoon, Talo, a few Poochyena, and even the occasional Marill. I loved walking in those woods with my mother and seeing all the little creatures run about. My mother always brought her Linoon Breeze to walk alongside us in case we were ever attacked, but we never were. Breeze was a quiet, gentle creature, and very kind to me and my brother and sister. She never got upset when we spilled juice on her, or bit us when we might have pulled her fur by accident. She was always calm and relaxed. That day, when we were walking through those woods, everything was still and quiet. We hadn't seen any of the usual Pokemon. All of a sudden, Breeze curled up into a tiny ball and started growling and whimpering, pure fear shining in her bright blue eyes.
"What's wrong, Breeze?"
my mother asked, trying to soothe the rattled Linoon. I followed where Breeze's eyes were pointing, and it was then I saw it. Perched on a log, directly in the center of a sun-dappled clearing, was an Absol. I didn't know what it was at the time. It looked lighter than air, like the slightest wind might blow it over. It was on its toes, ready to spring up and flee at any moment. My mouth hung open in awe of the strange and beautiful creature. My mother didn't see it. She was too occupied with trying to pacify Breeze. I suddenly snapped out of my stupor. "Mama, Mama, a Pokemon, a big white one! Mama!" I hollered. My mother sat up.
"Where?"
I turned around again, pointing a pudgy finger at the clearing. "Right over there. Where did it go?" The creature had gone. Breeze stood up again, barking at the spot where I had been pointing, before tearing off into the woods.
"Breeze, no, wait!"
my mother cried before sighing. The Linoon was gone.
"What did the Pokemon look like, Mickey?"
It was big and white and fluffy, and it had big black claws and a black tail and a black horn on its head to match. My mother's hands flew to her mouth and her eyes widened.
Honey, that was an Absol. We have to get home and call your father.
But Breeze...
No buts. Breeze is smart. She can find her own way home. We have to go. Now.
Shocked at my mother's abruptness, I meekly let her drag me home by my arm. I didn't know what was going on, but if it had anything to do with father, it had to be important. My father traveled most of the time and wasn't home very often, but always brought us the nicest gifts when he found time to come home to his family. Soon we were home. My mother raced to the phone, her fingers flying over the buttons as she dialed in the numbers. She was almost completely silent for several long minutes, her ear pressed to the phone with her only sounds being grunts and a few words here and there. Then suddenly she began to sob. Young as I was, I knew something was wrong, even as she hung up the phone, trying to contain herself. "Mama, what happened to Daddy?" My mother looked up, her eyes red, before hugging me and beginning to sob again. It was then I knew that my father was never coming back. My father had been in Lily Cove City, staying at the hotel there. He had been there to visit Mount Pyre and catch some Pokemon indigenous to that area, as well as check out the Safari Zone. However, one night he decided to go for a cruise. The captain of the boat was drunk and ran the ship up on the rocks. They were stranded forever. All we had to remember my father by was his mighty Enna, Grim, who he had left in his hotel room, and a gift that he'd been going to bring back for me. He had caught me my very own Pokemon, a beautiful female Vulpix he had captured on Mount Pyre. I named her Foxfire. It was amazing to finally have my own Pokemon. My brother Alex, who was 3 years older than me, had his Electrike, Jolt. My sister Ava, who was 2 years younger than me, had her Skitty, Blush, and now I finally had my own Pokemon. And I felt that in her, in my precious Foxfire, a tiny piece of my father lived on. The second time I saw the Absol was 2 years later when I was 8. I was playing in the backyard with my sister and our Pokemon. Our brother was in the front yard with his Manectric. He'd been asked to keep to the other side of the house because he was training his Pokemon, and Jolt was a good bit stronger than either of our Pokemon. I remember it quite clearly. We had all dressed up in eye patches and bandanas and fake peg legs, even our Pokemon, and we were all pretending to be pirates searching for buried treasure. We were making believe that the occasional bolts of lightning dancing away from the front lawn were an approaching storm, a typical child's game. I was supervising as my loyal Foxfire swabbed the deck with her tail when I chanced to look up. Straight ahead of me, not more than 20 feet away, was the Absol. I don't know how I knew, but I did. My Vulpix, noticing that I had stopped giving orders, looked up to see what it was that I was at. She saw it too, staring. The beast gave a low, guttural growl of its own name, and suddenly we heard a blood-curdling scream from the front yard, accompanied by a shock of lighting. The Absol fled into the woods. Without missing a beat, I turned to my sister. "Eva, quickly, go get Mama. I'll check on Alex." She nodded dumbly and ran inside the house. In seconds, I was in the front yard, Foxfire at my side. The sight I was met with was a grim one. My brother was pinned under a fallen tree, screaming and trying to struggle away as Jolt vainly tried to lift the wooden colossus off of his broken body. "Foxfire, go help Jolt!" I cried. She immediately obeyed, and I ran to my brother to see if I could get him to calm down. As I was doing so, the efforts of my Vulpix and his Manectric were joined by the strength of Breeze and Grim. Yes, Breeze came home that night. She was injured and shaky and almost fainted, but she was alive. My mother and sister quickly followed, joining us in the front yard. In minutes, we had the tree off of him, mainly thanks to Grim's move, Strength. The hospital was called, and Alex was taken away. It didn't look good. 8 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone. His spine and neck were both badly cracked, and both of his legs and his hips were shattered. Apparently, while my brother had been training, he had failed to notice a lightning rod embedded in one of the trees. One of Jolt's attacks had been pulled to it, and the old tree was too weak to remain standing and fell on Alex. The doctors could almost save him. One of his ribs had punctured his lung, and they might be able to fix him in time to prevent him from drowning in his own blood. He almost died in the hospital that very night. I had lost my father, and then just 2 years later, my beloved older brother was taken from me. I was there when he died. I stayed at his bedside until the very end. I can remember his final words before he had to move to a doctor's house. "You know, it's sad, Mickey. I always thought I'd be a gym leader." For a long time, my mother, my sister, and my dear little Vulpix were my only comfort. I frequently cried myself to sleep holding Foxfire in my arms. I decided to call that Absol Reaper. It seemed an appropriate name for a herald that made all those I loved disappear. It was another year before Reaper brought his unwelcome presence back into my life. My sister had just left on the school bus. I wasn't going to school that day, I wasn't feeling well, but I can still remember the picture of her smiling and boarding that bus, her skitty peeking out of her backpack. I was watching the vehicle disappear down the road, waving all the way, and then suddenly Reaper was there. He was sitting on a rock across the street watching me. I blinked, my arm frozen in midair, my blue-gray blanket still clutched tightly around my shoulders. Suddenly, the ground was rocked by a huge explosion. I whipped my head around, staring at the bus. The entire vehicle was in flames, a mushroom cloud of smoke billowing up from it. I dropped my blanket and began to run down the road, hoping to see if my sister or anyone else was okay, save them if I had to. I had a fire-type Pokemon. I was used to a burn or two. I was still quite far away when there was a second explosion. This one knocked me off my feet. I fell to the ground crying, covered in dust and too shocked and upset to get up. Even though I was only 9, I knew that no one could have survived that explosion. I looked back towards the house, trying to see if my mother was coming, but the only thing my mind could register was that Reaper was gone again. The fire department was called, and the street was filled with firemen for the next 2 hours. Everyone in the bus survived miraculously, unlike what I thought. Over the next week or two, we gathered bits and pieces of information. It was almost a whole month before the town had figured out what had happened. One of the high school jocks, wanting to look cool, had brought a Voltorb on the bus. His sibling had seen him sneak it inside his backpack as he left the house, but for a long time was too scared to say anything. After he had snuck the volatile Pokemon on the bus, he and his friends started taunting it, thinking it was funny. The creature became angry and used its signature move, self-destruct. That was the first explosion. The second explosion was the flames reaching the gas tank. My sister and many of my friends had been severely injured, just like my brother, and the event scarred the whole town. No one really talked about it, but there was a silent recognition that hung in the air for months, sharing the hurt of the fact that most of us had lost a friend or relative in that tragedy. I became a very solemn child, almost as sorrowful as my mother. I was in great pain, but I can't even imagine what it was like for her, losing her husband and all but one of her children in a short 3 years. My darling Foxfire was my only joy left. She was so sweet, always trying her hardest to cheer me up and make me laugh. I never did laugh. I was hurting too badly for that, but I made sure that she knew I appreciated her trying. For 3 years, I was solemn. For 3 years, Foxfire did her best to bring me joy. For 3 years, I felt peace. A grim, ugly, empty kind of peace, a peace full of finality, the kind of feeling you get when you have just had a victory, but at a cost. But 3 years of peace nonetheless. For 3 years, I thought it was over, but for 3 years, I was dead wrong. The day was overcast and gloomy. It perfectly suited my mood. Earlier, I had found a box of some of my siblings' things, and so my head was clouded with the sorrow of their deaths. I was walking through the backyard, hoping the fresh air would clear my head a little. Foxfire was trying to cheer me up, as usual. She was doing something particularly funny. She had found an old hat and scarf of my mother's, and was strutting around, wearing them like she was a supermodel. It was so cute, and she looked so funny. She was just trying so hard for me that for the first time in years, I almost felt happy. As we walked by the well, she jumped up on its edge and began to saunter around on two legs, pretending it was a catwalk. She looked so comical doing that the edges of my face seemed to crack a little as I finally gave a pained smile. My eyes were watering with the borderline of what were almost tears, but I was ever so slightly smiling. And then I saw him. Two burning red eyes peeking out of the trees surrounding the lawn. It was Reaper. Suddenly, Foxfire began to stumble. She had slipped on a wet patch of moss on the well's edge. I realized what was about to happen and dove for her. Foxfire, no! I was half a second too late, my fingers just brushing her tail as she disappeared down the well, hitting the water 10 feet below with a splash. I reacted instantly, dropping the bucket down. Foxfire, grab the bucket, get in! I felt the end of the rope gain weight, and then it was gone for a split second before returning. Then it was gone again. It was a full minute before there was a consistent weight present in the bucket below, but as soon as there was, the splashing was gone. Panic took full control as I pulled the bucket back up as fast as I could. In it lay my Vulpix, waterlogged and only barely breathing. She was a fire type. She couldn't handle being in the water that long. That and the heavy liquid filling her lungs was quickly killing her. My Foxfire, my precious Pokemon, was just barely alive. I hoisted her out of the bucket, sobbing, and held her tightly to my chest. Foxfire, please, no, please don't leave me. I need you. You're all I've got left, I begged. Her eyes opened just slightly, looking at me. Please, Foxfire, you can't die. As soon as I finish school, you and me, we were going to go everywhere together. Please don't go. You can't. I love you. I sobbed, holding her tighter, as if that would keep life in her body. She smiled at me, weakly, and her eyes slid shut again. Her small chest heaved again. She just managed to live. I broke down. Foxfire was all I had left, and now she was hurt too. Through my pain and through the endless tears running down my cheeks, I noticed only one thing. The red eyes that had appeared between the trees had disappeared. After that, I lost myself. I stole hundreds of packages of cigarettes, and I lost track of my days. My life dissolved into hours upon hours of chain-smoking cigarette after cigarette. I knew that weak lungs ran in my family, but I didn't care that I was killing myself. I had nothing left to live for. It didn't matter to me if I died of old age or died locked in a smoky, cigarette bud-covered bedroom. Now I'm 13. I'm confined to bed with severe lung cancer. I knew this would happen, but I didn't care. I still don't. My mother doesn't care either. She hasn't been right in the head since my sister died. She probably won't even notice I'm gone. And if she does, I can only hope she'll respect my wish to die. It hurts to think, it hurts to talk, it hurts to breathe. I'm almost too weak to type this, but I type it because I don't think I'll be here much longer, and I wanted someone to find this just because I want someone out there to know. I've been refusing the treatments, and the doctors aren't sure how long I have left, but now I know I have very little time. Why? Reaper just appeared outside my window. He's staring straight at me. Hello, you must be here, like all the others, to know about my problem. They say they found me with the bodies, but it wasn't me. I guess I can take one more shot at convincing someone of my innocence before they take me away. When I was young, I lived with my family deep in the Santa Lune forest. It was just me, my mom and dad, and my older brother. My older brother had a Pikachu named Lois that he was best friends with. Every day, he and Lois would stand by the edge of the road and call out to any Pokemon trainer that passed by. Even though he had more wins than losses, he still grinned and went on training. My parents were always offering to get me a Pokemon, but I declined. I wanted the Pokemon to come to me. One day I was exploring in the woods when I came across a large clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a strange Pokemon I'd never seen before. It was bobbing up and down, singing to itself. It was late afternoon, so there was only a little light coming from beyond the trees. The rest of the clearing was illuminated by the candlelight from the Pokemon's candles. I had never seen this Pokemon before, but I was entranced by it. We played together, singing and dancing until it was so dark that even the strange Pokemon's light worked hard to illuminate the black. "Will you lead me home, friend?" I asked the Pokemon. It responded with a happy cry, then began drifting down the path. I followed it, and it led me right home. My parents had been sick with worry, and when I got home, they demanded to know where I had been. "But Mom, Dad, I was safe. I was with my friend, this Pokemon." I turned and pointed at the Pokemon. But Mom said, "Honey, you're too old for imaginary friends. There's no one there." I was very confused. How could they not see my friend?
Only you can see me, friend.
I heard a voice say. I realized it was coming from my companion.
We have a very special relationship, you and I. It will only be us forever and ever.
I didn't mind that. This Pokemon would only want me, right? What could be bad about that? Over the next few years, this Pokemon and I became very good friends. We did everything together. Mom and Dad thought I was crazy since I kept talking to nothing and often took me to a psychologist, but I didn't mind. They just didn't understand the relationship that me and my friend had. One day, my friend came to me.
Fyra, could you please take me to the trainer school? I would like to see it very much.
I happily agreed. I told my parents I was going to the trainer's school and led my companion there. He then asked me if I might buy him a berry from the shop next door while he looked around, and I agreed. I went into the store to buy a citrus berry while my Pokemon buddy disappeared into the school. He came to the shop a few minutes later, and we walked home together. "Friend?" I asked. "What should I call you?"
Oh, that's easy. Call me Chandelure.
The next time that we went on an outing like this happened a few weeks later. Chandelure wanted to go to Vanillville Town. I obliged, and when we were there, he asked me to get him a revival herb. I did so, and not long after Chandelure came back. This went on for years. Chandelure would ask me to take him places, and then request that I buy something for him. I honestly thought that these were simply fun outings and nothing more. But I was wrong. At home, we didn't have a TV. We didn't have the money to afford the coverage, so we never bothered buying one. But when I was 18, I moved out of my parents' home and went to live in Vanillville Town, where I could afford to get a TV and coverage. That's when I saw it, the news article. 10 more burned corpses were discovered today at the Poke Center in Vanillville Town. The identity of the murderer is unknown. Police are still investigating. I gasped, thinking of what a terrible tragedy that was. Until I remembered that earlier that day, Chandelure had wanted me to take it to see the inside of a Poke Center and had asked me to pick some flowers for it. My best friend was a monster. I immediately knew I had to get rid of the thing. Clearly, it was behind these deaths, and most likely many more. I picked up a box of matches and a lighter that had been sitting on the table. Chandelure would have to go. I waited and waited for Chandelure to show, to ask me to take it somewhere. When the doorbell rang, I jumped, but realized it wasn't Chandelure. It was probably my friends, whom I had invited over. As I got up, still holding the matches and the lighter, I walked into the living room. That's when I saw it. Floating there, candles burning.
Hello, Fyra.
"You!" I yelled. "You killed those people!"
That's not true, friend. I was surviving! Eating!
"You're not going to ruin any more lives, you monster!" I quickly lit the match and rushed at Chandelure, intending to hold it down and burn it to ashes. But at the last moment, Chandelure vanished. I couldn't stop myself, and my friend opened the door just as I rushed out. Somehow, probably because of that demonic Chandelure, the flame had grown as I rushed at the door. I slammed into my friend, catching them on fire. I had no choice but to watch as my friend burned to death. I dropped to my knees, horrified. I stayed that way even when the police came and took me away. So now that leaves us here. You, me, this police station. Wait, he's here. He's writing something on the walls. Can't you see it? I'm serious. He's writing, "Hello, friend. I'm still hungry." Chandelure, the luring Pokemon. Fire, ghost type. Being consumed in Chandelure's flame burns up the spirit, leaving the body behind. It wasn't long ago that I got lost in these icy mountains. I was venturing out in the wilderness to find some ice Pokemon to help me with my next gym, and I didn't realize how far I had gotten until I looked back and the mountains I had passed before all looked the same. Of course, I could have looked for my footsteps and make my way back, but with the storm that was taking place during my hike, the snow soon covered over the dents my snow boots made. I can only imagine it's been a few days since I've been up here. I've managed to survive by eating the snow and ice as water and some dry food that's been in my backpack ever since I started my journey, for in case I got lost, which now is the case. It's been hard to stay warm in this climate. Some days my layers just aren't doing it due to the hail and snowstorms. Even when it's still and the sky is clear, it's still at freezing point. I packed extra layers, but as I said, they aren't working. I've been trying to move around as much as possible so my body heat can keep generating. It gave me the time to try and call for help, but nonetheless, nothing has worked so far. I've had sleepless nights trying to get comfortable, but I already reckon the frostbite has gotten to my body, stopping myself from going to sleep. I tried reading through my Pokedex to see if there was anything my Pokemon team could do to help. The only thing I found was what my Darumaka could do. It reads, Darumaka is a round red Pokemon with an orange face and yellow curly eyebrows. It has 3 yellow ovals on its abdomen and a curvy yellow line on its back. Its paws are orange and have 3 digits each. It has very warm droppings, which ancient people put in their clothes to keep themselves warm. As unhygienic as it was going to save my life, and I had to keep feeding Darumaka as much as I could. Everyone else in my team got an unfair feed, and they even fought between themselves sometimes. But if it was going to save us, then that's what we were going to do. The 5 of them avoided Darumaka, seeing him as now an enemy more than a friend like he used to be. Food is currently running tight as I now have to resolve to eating ice and snow. Hopefully I can hold on longer by eating it rather than drinking water, but it's not good for warmth, as all ice and snow does is melt when exposed to heat, which ironically, Darumaka's body was currently doing, especially as a fire type. Every time I feel a harsh blow of wind flow into the cave me and my Pokemon were hiding in, all I can think about is that myth about the woman getting lost in the ice caps and becoming a Frozlass. Was it actually true? Sure, I suppose there wouldn't be the Pokemon it would become, but what if it was some old wives' tale? Surely if I died right here and right now, I wouldn't become a Frostlass, especially since I'm not female. To keep myself occupied when I can't sleep, I read through different Pokedex entries to read up some more things on different Pokemon, and see if I can catch some to help me out as my days run out. That's when I came across Frostlass and how it came to be the way it is. Its description was even more terrifying, and even caused me to be cautious. I should probably stay away from a Frostlass if I ever see one. A Glalie too. Who knew Pokemon could be so disturbing? Days have passed and I'm growing desperate. There's no more food and Darumaka isn't much help anymore. The Pokemon are fighting amongst themselves and I have to break it up half the time. Some of them have some violent wounds that bled heavily. I keep them in their Pokeballs more often so they can be safe. Darumaka is out nearly all the time to see if he could be any extra help, but it's no use. No food, no heat. I've recently heard something wandering around the caves. The first time I heard it, I staggered to my feet and called out to see if anyone was there. Even though there was no reply, I knew someone was there. I looked around for a while, but found no one. Either I was hearing things from being so tired and hungry, or someone was avoiding me and leaving me to die. The more the hours and days passed, the more I heard those sounds from the cave. Countless times I'd gotten up to look, but still, nobody was there. Until one time, while it was night, and the only light I had was from my Pokedex, I saw another glow come from the other side of the cave from where I was from. I slowly looked up so I wouldn't startle what was there in case it ran off, and all I saw was a glowing of light blue, the epitome of what people would color as ice. But not only blue, I saw a light yellow too. I squinted my eyes to see if I could see more, and it appeared to be two hollow-like eyes, the shining showing a ring of purple around them. Putting up more caution, I inched forward, making my way toward the figure, spotting more features as I moved closer. Its skin looked like it was made out of the silk of a kimono, and at the top of its head was something that looked like a rock, or a diamond, at least. I inhaled deeply without letting go and inched backward to my original position, hearing my speeding heartbeat in my ears. I tried to lower myself to the ground as slowly and as quickly as I could without being noticed. As soon as I got to the floor, I put my face first into the snow and put my hands on top of my head, slowing my breathing and keeping it as quiet as I could. Not only did I not have a Pokemon out, but I also didn't have the strength to fight with the condition I was in. I didn't want to mess with a wild Pokemon, especially one as dangerous as Frozlass, like I had read. A few minutes passed, and I soon felt the presence of a being there. I stopped my breathing and waited, pretending I was dead. If so, it would leave me alone. I felt surprisingly warm, arm-like joints lifting me up by my shoulders. I swallowed and turned my head to see that the Frozlass had lifted me up to my knees. Surprised that it could carry such weight at its size, I gave it a look of awe. It closed its eyes in a way like it was smiling, a friendly gesture for something I was afraid of. I clearly judged it too quickly. Can you help me? I spoke, my voice bitter with cold, shivering with tiredness. It looked into my eyes with its own, the glow still showing, shutting off for a few seconds as it blinked. It then nodded and let go of me. Floating on its own, it was majestic, beautiful, and glowed like a gem. I stared at it like it was holding some kind of charm on me, longing to gain its grace. I soon felt a cracking in my joints. I was so tired I was about to collapse. I would possibly die from the cold if I passed out. I moved my arms around to generate some heat, but it was no good. The more I moved, the more they cracked. It even hurt. I groaned and struggled. Frozlass, please help me and my Pokemon. I called out, my quiet voice struggling. It just stared at me, but now had its arms out towards itself, looking like it was giving me something, but nothing was there. I felt more pain come from my joints, and soon, the pain spread throughout my body. I heard snaps and cracks and lost feeling in my chest and arms. I was too cold to realize, but it was the snapping of my ribs and other bones. Tears formed in my eyes as I felt colder than before, surprised that that was even possible. My tears froze, catching in my tear ducts and scraping at my eyes like a cat's claw. Then, I couldn't move. My body was literally frozen, and frost grew on my hands and face, traveling across to my hair and chest. I could only stare at the Pokemon, which I soon saw was freezing me, breaking my limbs and freezing my body. Its eyes were no longer friendly, they were dull and dark. Instead of a glowing blue and yellow, they were now a gray and black. Even its colored body and Obi had dulled and lost its color by a shade. It was trying to kill me. I tried to scream out, but the freezing stopped me. I felt pain from each joint as they snapped soon after, breaking nearly all the bones in my body bit by bit. The scratching in my eyes had gotten worse as more tears formed and froze, causing them to bleed slightly. The trickling of my blood dripped on my face and froze in place too, scratching my cheeks. I felt cold from within me, getting worse as I could feel my organs freeze and tear. My body wanted me to vomit, but nothing would come. It had frozen with the rest of my body, and soon I was spitting chunks of bloody ice. It was freezing me inside out and outside in, making me cough blood that had frosted into shards, cutting my esophagus and throat as I tried to vomit it up. I probably wasn't its only victim. I was one of many, maybe thousands. I felt pain like no other as my pulse was beginning to slow down and get slower, and slower and slower. There was nothing more left of that trainer. He was soon frozen up into a tight block of ice, all his bones thoroughly crushed, his eyes, organs, and fluids frozen solid, and his heartbeat had stopped slowly until he was only but a statue of his former self, in the position of a scared child, on his knees, eyes closed tight, mouth wide open, and hands out in front of him. Only time would tell if he would be found again, or his Pokemon for that matter, if they survived the hunger. Either way, it was too late for him to live. All his body was damaged, and he would only be a lifeless corpse, murdered by a senseless creature, or in the situation, a creature full of sense. I'm not saying be afraid of all Pokemon, and I'm not saying they're all evil. Soulless eyes and blood-stained evil creatures do not exist in our time. But if you ever see a Frostlass in the wild when you're in desperate need of help, never ever ask it for help.